Nothing But the Truth. Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa from India Today and your host for Nothing But the Truth. Every week, we will deal with key issues of concern and bring you perspectives and clarity as to why these matter to you and what is the clear truth that emerges. All of us watched with horror and shock as reports and visuals came in about the triple train accident in Balasore in Odisha on June 2nd. At last count, 288 people had died and close to 1,200 people were injured, making this one of the worst train crashes in the history of Indian railways. It has again raised questions about how safe rail travel really is. So in this episode of Nothing But the Truth, we would answer the three big questions. 1, what went wrong? 2, who is to blame? And 3, what are the lessons we can learn from the Coramandel crash? So let's first look at the three trains that were involved. This was, as most of us know, the Coramandel Express that was moving from Shalimar to Chennai, and that was called the up line. And from the down line was the Yashwantpur, Kolkata or Howrah Express that was coming from the other side. There was also another goods train that had been parked at the Bahanagar Bazar railway station where the accident happened. There was also a fourth train, which is also a goods train on the other side, but that was not involved in the accident. So there were three big trains that were around where the accident happened. Now let's look at the station. This station, this Bahanagar Bazar station, is in Odisha, in the Balasore district, and comes under the Southeastern Railway. It's like any other station across the country, but it is one of the busiest because on that particular line, the rail utilization, as it is called, is close to 100%, which means that there is constant traffic that is going on. Now, if you look at the layout of the tracks at this particular station, it is quite typical of the smaller ones, of the thousands that we see across the country. And essentially, it has two main lines, the up line and the down line. And on this side, you have what is called a loop, where, if there is a superfast express that is coming and there is a slower train, that slower train is parked on the loop. And on the other side as well, there's another loop. So essentially, you've got two loops here and the two main lines that run. Now, the route that these two trains were traveling, as well as the others, boasted of what is one of the most sophisticated electronic interlocking systems, which is the nerve center of the signaling system of the Indian Railways for traffic management. This is entirely software driven, and what it does is it clears all trains, all traffic on these routes is cleared by it through a system of signals, loop lines, and of course clearances that are received from the station master that is there in each of these stations. By doing this, they eliminate all manual relays that used to be there in the past, including if you had to change a train from the main line to the loop line. If you remember in the past, you would see a person who would actually take a lever and push it down so that those pointer blades move like this and the train is able to move in that. I'm giving you the lay of the land because this is very critical to what happens next. Because on that fateful day, as I said, there was the Coramandel Express that was heading towards Chennai, and you had the Howrah Express that was coming in from Yashwantpur on the other track, and you had goods trains on either side. Now let's come to really what happened on that day. I spoke to key railway personnel, and my colleagues from India Today did as well, and we put together the sequence of events that took place on that fatal day at the Bahanagar Bazar station. Here is what seems to have transpired, and I'm going to give you times, and that's very important because the accident happens at 6:55 p.m. on June 2nd. Almost 2 hours before that, there is a set of circumstances that is now being traced as to what really happened and why the accident happened. So we start at 4:35 p.m. where the signal inspector of that station, whose job it is to oversee signal maintenance, approaches the station master with a handwritten memo to say that he needs to finish replacing the manual boom barrier at the railway crossing nearby with a more lightweight electric lifting barrier. Now this barrier is button operated, which is replacing, far more efficient than the mechanical ones that you see in a lot of these railway crossings. And this railway crossing was pretty close to the cabin of the station master, not some, not too far away. And it was very important that when these people were replacing this, that all traffic had to be halted. So the permission is taken for that, as well as the station master authorizes what is called a disconnect, which delinks this entire boom barrier that is there and the traffic crossing from the main interlocking system. Why is that important? Because the moment you disconnect that, as I had mentioned to you earlier, the interlocking system that is there, whether it is on the railway crossings, whether it is on the loop lines, whether it is the signals, all connected. So if there is any wrong movement that is happening on the boom barrier or the railway crossing, the entire signal interlocking system will shut all trains down and make it stop from crossing that station, because it understands there's a danger. But because repair work was being done, which I told you was the replacement of the boom barrier, the station master gives this signal and says, okay, you can go ahead and disconnect it, which means that whatever work is going on there, whatever signals are coming there, the signal interlocking system will ignore it. It knows that it is down, it doesn't have to worry about it, it is being manually handled. Now, a very interesting thing, as they keep, there was a lot of work to be done in that particular boom barrier. They had, as I mentioned, had to replace the old one, so they had built a concrete pedestal. And today, that particular day that they were doing it, they had to put the ELB or the barrier that was there and connect the wires, most importantly, into the relay box at a location box nearby. These relay signals are the key to operating the interlocking systems, and that was one of the tasks they had to do. Now, we knew that everything was normal because at 6:35 p.m., a particular goods train loaded with iron ore was traveling on the up line and was heading to Chennai. But because the Coramandel Express was to come 20 minutes later, it was diverted into the loop that was right over in the station over there and was parked waiting for the Coramandel Express to cross. So we know that till that point, everything was in order. The next set of instructions happened when at 6:51 p.m., which is in the logbooks, the signal inspector reports to the station master that he has been able to repair the boom barrier and the system can be reconnected. The boom barrier system could be reconnected. This is 6:51, mind you, 4 minutes before the Coramandel Express is crossing the particular station that they're working on. Now, this is where the first big major flaw that happens. The station master is supposed to do what is called a physical verification, which is that he asks the signal inspector to stay at the boom barrier, and he's got this computer console in his cabin, and with a click of the mouse, he presses a button to see if the boom barrier is working or not, or all signals are in consonance. For some odd reason, a strange reason, he does not do that. Neither the station manager nor the signal inspector does that particular thing. Meanwhile, the signal inspector has replaced in this relay system. The subsequent investigation shows that there are new wires that are put in which connect the boom box, and if you looked at that particular panel, there are 6 red wires that have been connected at that particular point, which I'm telling you was between 6:45 to 6:15 p.m. and the station master, instead of doing a physical verification, gives the all clear signal, which is he presses another button, and where the Coramandel Express is coming, there is a signal which is called the distance signal, which is 2 kilometers away from the railway station, and that signal turns green. Now, for the Coromandel's driver, the loco pilot as he's called, once he sees the green light, he thinks that he's clear to move past the station because he's not stopping at all, which means he can travel at the maximum speed of 130 kilometers. Mind you, at that particular time, he's just going 2 kilometers less than the maximum, which is about 128 kilometers, and he's speeding down, confident that he has now got clearance and he doesn't have to stop anywhere. The next signal is called the home signal. Now, that is 180 meters before the loop line of that station, and there also it is green. So the driver does not feel that there's any problems at all because he's got 2 greens and he's traveling at this phenomenal speed of 128 kilometers per hour. But an anomaly is there, that he does not know that actually what has happened in this interim 4 to 5 minutes is that the main line is now connected to the loop line. There are pointer blades, there is a signal that happens and this pointer is called point 17A, and if there is any switchboard that triggers that, These pointer blades do is they turn like this, which means that a train that is coming here is forced to get into this. And this is called the loop line. And remember, there is already a goods train with iron ore, filled with iron ore, waiting over there, and the loop line is stationed there. Ideally, the Coramandel Express should have just gone ahead, but for whatever reason, whatever error that has built up, it turns into the loop line and slams into the rear wagons of the stationary goods train. This is at 128 kilometers per hour, and you can imagine the impact. The train actually goes up the engine goes up like this, and there are 23 coaches. 6 of them are sent cartwheeling. So if it's moving like this, these 6 are moving and getting out. Unfortunately, at that point, there is the Yeshwantpur-Howrah Express, which is coming from the opposite direction and exiting the station. But before it can exit, this accident happens, and some of the bogies, some of the coaches of the Coramandel Express go and hit 2 of the Yeshwantpur, the tail end of the Yeshwantpur Express, the Yeshwantpur-Howrah Express, and as a result of that also derails. So the scenes, I mean, there are 3 major accidents that have happened, 3 trains involved in this accident, and the scenes are horrific. Many eyewitnesses that we spoke to felt like that there was an earthquake that had taken place in the village, or that a missile had struck, because there is a nearby missile range. And one of them that we spoke to was Bhagat Prasad Rath, whose house is very close to the station. He said he heard the explosion and rushed to the spot. And the scenes he described are really sad. He says that there were people wailing loudly, and he had to walk through body parts strewn all over, and he saw a well-to-do person crying for help. He helped him get up, and he walked some distance on his shoulder, supporting him. And then that person collapsed right in front of his home and died in front of his eyes. There were others who were luckier. There was one person called Lakshmi Narayan Dal, who was a cook by profession, and he's around 52 years old, and he was traveling to Andhra Pradesh and was in the sleeper coach right behind the engine of the Coramandel Express that had rammed into the stationary goods train. And he describes it, and you can imagine what he says. He says, our bogie was almost flying, and I had to hold on to the handrails so tight as fellow passengers in the pack coach, they kept being thrown against me with a gigantic force. And he says, I'm lucky to be alive. And he had only a few fractures and was soon back on his feet. But unfortunately, there were 288 people who didn't have that kind of luck, and they died, and close to 1,100 people were injured. Mind you, the 2 trains had been ferrying close to 2,300 people, 300 passengers, and nearly 1,500 were either injured or were dying. So you can understand the magnitude of the problem. Now, Ashwini Vaishnav, who's the Union Railways Minister, had rushed to the spot, and there's an interesting back story to this. He was actually flying in on that day to Goa when he heard the news, and he had landed in Goa at 9:30 p.m. in the night at the Panjim airport, and he was to inaugurate a Vande Bharat train the next day. But as soon as he got down, his officials told him of the sad incident, and immediately he called the war room to find out what was the thing and whether the National Disaster Forces were sent there to rescue. He called up people in Odisha, and interestingly, he was collector of Balasore, where the station is, Balasore district. Very long back, he's from the IAS cadre of Odisha, and he had actually served there. And in 1999, when there was a super cyclone, it was Vaishnav who was the district collector who ensured that not one person died in that particular cyclone. But in this circumstance, it was vastly different. Vaishnav had to turn around immediately. He caught the Goa-Delhi flight, the flight that he came in, then he took a chartered flight to Bhubaneswar, and then traveled by a special railway train, an inspection train, right to the accident spot. By the time he reached, it was 6 in the morning, and of course, he immediately got down to the rescue and relief measures. He got the area cleared of all the derailed bogies, made sure that treatment was given to those injured, and for the dead, they were, their relatives could come and have a decent funeral that was there. He was able to clear the entire area within 51 hours, so that other trains that normally it takes about a week or so, but he was under his supervision, they were able to clear that station, and trains started resuming. which is a record of its own and is also laudatory. But let's come to the second big question: who is to blame? Now, we know that after that, multiple agencies have started working on the investigation process. There is the Commission of Railway Safety, which comes under the Civil Aviation Ministry, that is normally tasked with investigating these railway accidents. But in this particular case, since they felt after doing the preliminary investigation that there could be the possibility of sabotage, that the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI, has been brought in also to investigate and see if there was any sabotage involved. Of course, it's too early days to find out, but one thing is very clear, that there was a clear contradiction in the signaling situation. We know that, as I mentioned earlier, there was a major violation on the part of the signal inspector and the station master after the new boom barrier was fixed and the fresh connections with the electronic interlocking system were made. What I had mentioned earlier, they had failed to carry out a physical verification, which is the station master should have pushed the buttons on his control panel, got an affirmation from the signal inspector that everything was okay, and then only gave the clearance to the Coramandel Express. This is a standard operating procedure, and no record apparently has been maintained of such a verification. And according to preliminary to sources that talk about this, there seems to be that no verification was done also, even though if there was no record. This suggests that both the station master and the signal inspector were guilty of dereliction of duty, but the investigation has to show that. We know that there was one major problem that occurred, and these two people are apparently very experienced. They should not have done that. The second thing that top experts say is, what is amazing is that if there was a manual interference that was introduced into the electronic relay system so that it managed to send out faulty orders, why wasn't the interlocking system working as per the protocol that is there, which is that if there is a problem, it will go to a default setting, and the default setting will push all the signals to red, which means no trains can go. So if there was an anomaly where it knows, the system senses that there was a goods train at the loop line, there is no way the Coramandel Express should come into this line. It should have actually showed red right from the distance signal before Coramandel Express entered the station. It didn't. It showed green. So there is something seriously wrong also with the signaling system, because it should have identified the problem, because it has the intelligence. It is meant to know that there is a goods train there is a loop that is joining, and there's no way another train should come into the loop. It did not sense that, and that is the other things the investigation agencies, both the CBI and the Commission of Railway Safety, has to investigate and find out what had happened in this particular moment. Was that an error of judgment, a simple lapse that happened, or something more dubious and sinister that happened over there? Now, meanwhile, another erroneous signal incident surfaced when a damaging letter dated February 9th was leaked by the, we don't know who leaked it, but was written by the Chief Operating Manager of the Southwestern Railway, and he mentioned that there was a serious flaw in the electronic locking system when a day earlier, that is February 8th, the route of dispatch for the Sampark Kranti Express was altered, and strangely enough, the train which was supposed to move on one particular line was moving on the wrong line, and that would have put the train in collision with another train that was coming. Fortunately, at that point, there was a very alert loco pilot or driver that halted the train and called up and said there's something seriously wrong, and averted a possible collision. Now, what sources tell us was that the railways took no action against this errant signaling. Remember, this happened on February 8th. This incident that is happening, the major accident that happens on June 2nd, you just have March, April, May, June, that's barely 3 months, and yet there was no action taken so that, if there was a problem, it could have been rectified. And this was the issue that many opposition parties talked about when they demanded Vaishnav's resignation, the railway minister's resignation, because many of them said that if this had been detected and investigated, the February incident, maybe the Coromandel crash would not have happened, because as I mentioned earlier, there was a an enormous signal intelligence failure, that was an interlocking failure that had happened. But the minister was clear that he would not yield to their demand for resignation. He is said to have told his close associates that resigning at this time was not the right thing to do. He felt he had a moral responsibility not to run away, but work and ensure that whatever relief and rescue had to be done and to fight what he called the war. He felt that people needed him to show the courage to bring the situation back from the brink. So what then are the lessons from the Coromandel crash? Now, many experts argue that India's track record of all rail accidents is better than most other countries, especially given the vast size of the network that makes it one of the largest in the world. There are something like 100,000 kilometers of running tracks, and if you want to get into more detail, if you take a look at the total number of stations and trains that are run, there are 13,169 passenger trains a day, and they transport over 5 billion passengers last year, or 4 times the country's total population. Imagine that. It also runs 8,600 freight trains, and various experts say when you look at the track record of the railways and if you compare what is what they take as the benchmark for rail accidents and the rate of rail accidents, they say that we must give credit to the Indian Railways, because if you look at the past decade or so, they have come down drastically. And if you take a look at the accidents per million train kilometer, which is an international parameter, the experts say that India's rate has come down from 0.65 in 2001 to 0.03 in 2022, which is a very, very creditable achievement. But let's not forget that the balasore accident, the worst railway mishap that we have seen since 1995, revives crucial concerns about safety and other systemic challenges before the Indian Railways. I'm going to take only a couple of examples because this is quite a complex subject, but let us look at what the Comptroller and Auditor General report for the period which was December 22, which came out with a very critical report against the Indian Railways. It said, when it did a full survey of the safety, that the railways fell far short of the safety benchmarks according to its own protocols. It audited rail accidents for the past 4 years, and it showed that 69% were caused by train derailments, followed by track renewal and mechanical failure. And then the CAG report went on to red flag issues such as track defects, engineering and maintenance issues, and operating errors as some of the primary causes for derailments. What is also important is that the CAG report said that the amount spent on rail safety and track renewal was inadequate. Now, as an example, they pointed out that in 2017 and 2018, the railways had set aside rupees 1 lakh crore as a safety fund called the Rashtriya Rail Sanraksha Kosh. And at the end of 5 years, almost 30% or a third of the funds that was allocated, that was 1 lakh crores, remain unutilized. Now, of course, the Railway Ministries counters this by saying that the way the auditors have looked at it is not quite correct, because if you looked at the data that was there, they compare the periods between 2014 and 2022 and look back at the previous decade, that is between 2004 and 2014, and they say that in that decade as compared to this decade they spent 2.5 times more than what was spent in the earlier decade for issues like track renewal, bridges, level crossings, and railway over and under bridges, apart from signaling works that is there. While there is a dispute of whether the resources were sufficient or not, there is no denying one thing, that manpower and maintenance remain the weak links in the chain of railway operations. One of the issues that people have highlighted is that loco pilots do something like 12 hours or more in terms of duty. In fact, on May 17, the Railway Board pulled up the Southeast Central Railway after it found that almost 36% of its crew had been working for more than 12 hours a day. The latest CAG report also highlights this particular problem, apart from skill deficit, particularly among the contractual workers, and the poor follow-up in terms of training of the staff. Now, these are serious problems, because if you take a look of the fact of long duty hours, and if they exceed a certain point, they began to impact on safety. As we all know, that if you get tired, and these are very, very sensitive things, whether it's the loco pilots, the motormen, the signaling staff, if they are tired and their shifts are longer than 12 hours, there is a chance that they could make mistakes, and that could be very serious. So it is now said that they must mandate the number of hours, and this should not be observed in the breach, and that is a very, very important thing. Now, apart from that, the next critical thing, so one is the manpower, what it needs. Let us look at the other aspect, which is maintenance of track, signaling and rolling stock. And there, these should have been the big priorities. But what the experts say, and this is the criticism, is that these days there is an obsession with punctuality and completing maintenance tasks within the available time. That the reason behind that is because, as we said, in the southeastern railway sector, the rail lines are 100% engaged. So there is a rush to get things done by the station masters so that these trains are not delayed. Now, this Bahanagar station is one of the busiest routes that I said earlier, and there lies the problem that if you rush through some of these things, the protocols could be broken, and then you have a serious situation. Now, this is something that the railways needs to avoid, which is to ensure that apart from timing and punctuality, there is enough time given to the staff to carry out maintenance and repairs. I was also talking about staff shortage, the lack of trained staff, but there is another serious concern, and this was raised by the Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge in a letter to the Prime Minister after the crash, where he said there are close to 300,000 posts lying vacant in the Indian Railways. Now, many of these fall in the safety categories, he said. The lack of manpower compromises the ability to conduct regular checks, leading to potential safety hazards. So, when staff do not get the appropriate time to respond to emergencies, this then causes its own set of problems in terms of whether disrupting train services, and therefore they need to keep this in mind while dealing with staff, get the requisite staff, though the railways say that they have recruited more than 500,000 people in the last 9 years since the Modi government has come. And the other reason is that the growing automation of services is meant to reduce staff, not to augment it. But we cannot ignore the fact that if there is less staff that is there, if the staff is not adequate or trained, this could be a serious problem. So we've talked of manpower and the issues that are there. We've talked of maintenance and what needs to be done, whether it's tracks. We've talked of the signaling system and why it must become foolproof, despite the fact that it claims to be foolproof. These things need to be reviewed very, very seriously and made sure the money that is being put aside should be spent on it. Now, to conclude, I spoke to an expert, and he says, I asked him what is the lessons of the crash, and he said the first lesson, the first big lesson is don't hide your failures. That is very important, because if you hide your failures, you're not going to learn from them. You have to take into account everything that is happening and make sure that these are rectified. So it is now the onus of the Indian Railways to take measures to ensure that rail travel remains safe in the country. That is the key, that all these issues that we pointed out, the railways needs to attend to, so that we do not have the kind of horrific accidents that happened at Odisha, at Balasore, and all of us, of course, are deeply saddened by what happened. For more details of the entire train accident and why it happened, the in-depth charts and everything else, do read the latest issue of India Today, where I, along with my colleagues, have written a very detailed report. Thank you for being with me on this episode of Nothing But the Truth. I look forward to having you with me the next time. Nothing but the truth.